Welcome. Today I have the honor of interviewing Donnie Yance, a man who has dedicated his life to service, initially by being a monk, and now by being a dedicated practitioner in service and healing using botanical and nutritional support. Donnie's the founder of the Mederi Foundation and Natura Healing Products. Donnie's a master herbalist, nutritionist, researcher, musician, lover of nature and the divine. His latest book, Adaptogens in Herbal Medicine, is a Bible of the relationship of how nature and herbs support us, spirit, mind, and body. It's an encyclopedia of knowledge and healing. Donnie teaches practitioners worldwide and has made monumental strides in the understanding, treatment, prevention, and relationship of the soul, mind, and body in the treatment of disease and prevention. I believe Donnie's relationship to nature, music, and prayer, with his scientifically based research based on 25 years of clinical evaluation, has manifested in what is now the ETMS approach. The most exciting development is a recent trial with Ohio State University James Cancer Center and Mederi, which we will discuss. It's a time for a marriage of East meets West, and that's exactly what Donnie Yance is doing, starting with Ohio State University. Thrive, not survive, is his motto. I love it because most of us are just getting by, not listening or having a relationship with our bodies. Please join us. So maybe we should start with, how did this all come about? Who is Donnie? How did Donnie get to this point?
It started all in, I think, the first epiphany I had was really in high school, when both I had a girlfriend that had a mom that was very much into the 60s and 70s version of health back then, which was Carlton Fredericks, Adele Davis, and so I used to go over to their house, and all of a sudden I was eating health food, mostly wheat germ, whole grain bread, things of that nature, and I was intrigued by that, and started to think it made sense. And then my cousins that actually lived here in Oregon, they lived out in the Applegate in a tree house, believe it or not, off the grid. The real thing, the whole package, back when it wasn't,
Wow.
Wasn't popular. And I visited them, and I just couldn't believe how they lived and how beautiful it was. And they had exposed me to this wonderful book and gave it to me, called Back to Eden, written by Jethro Kloss, which was written in what's called the Thomsonian herbal medicine system, which was the crudest system of herbal medicine practiced in this country, which then manifested into what's called physiomedicalism and eclectic medicine, which then I've gone on to become kind of a scholar of eclectic medicine. And I often say that my herbal roots are in eclectic medicine. So I think that's where it started. Then I started hanging out at the health food store back in the mid-70s, and lo and behold, they said, well, you're here all the time. Would you like to start working here? So in high school, I was actually working in the natural food store, picking up every book, reading everything I could from every perspective. And then I was a musician as well, so I was actually starting to gig quite a bit. Music is very important to my life. And then I had another epiphany, one more of a spiritual nature that came about through St. Francis of Assisi, that kind of brought me back into my own faith, but with a new light. And I started hanging out at a Byzantine Eastern Rite Franciscan monastery, so much so that I went on to become a secular, or what's also called a third order Franciscan, that then moved into actually living in the monastery, wanting to pursue the religious life, which I spent almost 3 years in the monastery. So I got very exposed to the life of a monk, basically. Yeah. And I left the monastery to run a soup kitchen and a shelter, and went back into working in the natural food store. And that manifested into actually owning my own with what was my best friend, and still is one of my closest friends back in Connecticut. And then that blossomed into wanting to get an education in nutrition, an education in herbal medicine. So I went on to that, and lo and behold, I started a clinic, and then the clinic manifested and just grew and grew. And, I'm very much, I'm a person that works really hard. And so everything I do, I work daily at what I do to become better and better. And then a lot of people ask, well, how did you kind of get into, what's the next layer to this whole piece? And I'd say that a big piece of it, and I often want to, I'll share this ring that I wear on my finger, this ring here. This ring is very much a reflection of me. If you look at it closely, you'll see it's very whimsical. There's no straight lines. And that was given to me by a woman named Sinclair Williams, who was my first cancer patient. And that's probably around 1989-90 was my first exposure to somebody with really a young woman with serious breast cancer, advanced. Double mastectomy, lots of chemotherapy, lots of radiation. And she was so angelic. And I kind of fell in love with her presence and her spirit, and I didn't know that much about cancer, and I did the best I could. And then our clinic actually renamed her from Sinclair and gave her the name St. Clair because she was so angelic.
Oh, wow.
And then when she passed on, a few days later, her parents came into my office and said Sinclair passed, and the last thing that she did was finish this ring like the day before she died, and she wanted you to have it and wanted you to know how much you meant to her in her life. And I said, oh my gosh. I said, now I know my calling, basically. I said, this is what it's all about. And so I said, I'm going to learn everything I can about cancer and about medicine and just keep going at it until I can help more and more people. And so I'd say that was a big turning point for how I got really drawn into the whole cancer world.
And here we are now.
And here
I'm
we are
sitting
now.
in your incredible
25,
Mederi
26 years
Center.
later.
Yeah, you have a product line of Natura. There's so much that you've done, and it seems like your background of being a monk and a musician, everything has kind of come together.
Yes.
And in this creation, can you talk about Mederi and the ETMS model? And
yeah, so Mederi is, I've had this clinic, Center for Natural Healing, and I've always been a person my doing has to be reflected from my being. And because I'm Franciscan, I really believe in a nonprofit mission. And so that's, I'm not here to grow my own personal wealth and so I really believe in doing things through nonprofit means. And so eventually I felt this big pull to both create a foundation, which we call Mederi, which actually is a Latin word, which means to heal and be whole. That's what the word literally means. And the word medicine and medicinal comes from that same word. So I really felt the need to do both research to kind of validate natural medicine, particularly the complexity of good natural medicine, which does involve botanical medicine, nutritional medicine, dietary medicine, lifestyle medicine, and then often some pharmaceutical medicine where it fits into a cooperative whole and making the system be the medicine, not just an herb or a drug. And so really how things converge and how they keep adapting and they're living just like we are. So I wanted to find a way to validate that. So our foundation is based in research, and we're starting to actually do some very exciting clinical research. Then education. So I said, here as I'm developing this model, which we call the eclectic triphasic medical system. I know that's a lot for people to grasp, so we also call it, for short, Mederi medicine, And it's the system that over these 25 years has just developed in my being that I kind of feel the architect to it, but it's there. I'm just kind of exposing it more. It doesn't belong to me. That's why it's not the Donnie Yance system. And it's not the Donnie Yance Foundation. And it's not the Donnie Yance Clinic. I'm just a spoke on the wheel of what's being created.
Spoke.
Yeah.
I mean, it's your formulas, it's your relationship with the plants and the herbs, it's your understanding of that.
Right.
We talked about that earlier, just when you were talking about the plants and how they're alive and how they work to heal. That was pretty incredible.
Think plants are one of the humblest signs of God's love for us in the world. There's nothing more there's nothing more humble than the fact that often the greatest plants that can heal us are the weeds that under our feet that are growing in the cracks and sidewalks of New York City, or the ones like dandelion that everyone's trying to kill on their lawn. These are like some of the most medicinal plants, and I just find it, just really humbling to know what the earth, or Gaia is offering us. And so, so then I created the clinic. The clinic's been here, and so the clinic was then absorbed into the foundation. So we have sort of the laboratory, which is the clinic, which is also the place where I practice and other practitioners can practice. We have the apothecary, where medicine is made for people,
so
and
cool.
people get here. Then we have now a wing that is about how do we convince the world that this approach is valid and good and is better in every way for people, going to give people a better quality of life, a longer life, and ultimately what I also think is save the healthcare model, which is going to bankrupt us all. So that's really a big part of my personal desire is to validate this. And then how, as I grow this Mederi medicine, or this ETMS as we call it, how am I going to teach other people an integrative model and how it works? What kind of lenses do we use? What kind of toolboxes that we have? So to expand upon ETMS, because everything stems out of the medical model.
Right.
Because everyone's calling, you go into every big cancer institution and say, oh, we have integrative medicine, and what they are offering is massage or maybe acupuncture and some, quote unquote, mind body work. But the last thing, the big no-no is herbal medicine and things. And that is the soul of ETMS. So we're just flipping it all around. The soul of our medicine really is herbal medicine and lifestyle medicine, dietary medicine, and then everything else, like where a drug or two might fit into that, or some of the contemporary medicine might fit in, what I call the glamorous medicine, because it throws its, it puts its lights on, it's beaming right in you, whether it be targeted agents, chemotherapy, everything is meant to affect us immediately and be glamorous, where the pharmacy outside is really humble and it's subtle. And it's beautiful, but it really might be what really ends out being the most significant contributor to our long-term well-being, but it never shined its face like that. We can't say, oh, this herb did this, that herb did that. There's always a knowing and an unknowing quality to it. So the mystery and the knowing living together in natural medicine, where
we really don't know, even though there are claims, what a lot of the pharmaceutical chemo agents really do. We do know that there can be a lot of harm, and that a lot of doctors, or the old paradigm is you're not supposed to take anything with it. But the amazing work that you're doing is kind of East meets West, is kind of a marriage and an understanding that these two communities can exist together. And
Exactly.
which is so important.
Yeah.
And also what I've learned from you is that, you want a tumor test. You don't want to just do a shot in the dark. You want to not react out of fear. You want to take your time and build a plan. So the really exciting thing is your study with Ohio State University James Cancer Center, and I'd love to talk about that, because this is the beginning of that possibility.
5 years in the making. I don't know if we went back 5 years and said we would actually redo all the work that we've had to put in to get this approved, but it is a monumental shift in the fact that we are doing a clinical trial with advanced breast cancer, women that have failed hormonal therapy and chemotherapy, and they are going to get bathed, as I call it, in a lot of good herbal and nutritional medicine. A good portion will be standardized, that they all will be getting a foundational protocol, and then they will all be meeting with me, and then the protocols will be adapted based on the assessment that we do. And now going back to the assessment, because that's really key. So in ETMS, there are 3 ways that we assess people. One is the host, which is the presentation of the person. So, and that's subjective often, based on a relationship, actually being able to sit with someone and listen to them. Believe it or not, that's actually important, to actually be attentive and listen, to take notice of things, how people talk, how they breathe, what their eyes look like, what their symptoms are, what their past is, what do they present energetically. Then, once we move from the host assessment, we move into what I call the microenvironment. And that's where you look at all of the blood work. And then the idea is to look at that blood work from a few different perspectives. Not just is it in the normal range, or what value we can take of it from the little bits of blood work that people normally get done, CBC, a chem profile, but how can we expand upon the blood work to learn more about the microenvironment? And the microenvironment becomes key because it's the interplay between the health of the host and then often the tumor. And so what we're looking for is to create that microenvironment to be the most conducive to the health of the host and the least conducive to the strength and intelligence of the tumor that they may have. Or we also look at that microenvironment from the standpoint, is your tumor actually gotten to a point, or your cancer, to manipulate that environment and has taken control? And you're able to see that by assessing various blood biomarkers, not only tumor markers, but what we call terrain markers that look at all kinds of things. So from that second lens, the blood work, we move on to now the tumor. So I'm less interested whether you have a tumor in the breast, the pancreas, the stomach, the brain, more in what's called the phenotype of the tumor, which is a way of molecularly assessing what I call the personality of the tumor. What kind of growth factors are upregulated? What kind of mutations? What things are being expressed that tell us both of its intelligence as well as the sensitivity it may have to some allopathic treatments, whether it be certain chemotherapeutic agents or targeting agents, as well as what factors we can use to use our own toolbox, botanical medicine. Because botanical medicine can be used to strengthen the host. It can be used to alter the microenvironment. We are also learning the ability of compounds and herbs to actually target abnormalities found right in the tumor. And that's beautiful when you can see how all the pieces, I call it putting the puzzle together, the healing puzzle, and they're just pieces that start fitting together. And the more pieces fit together, the more miraculous the improvements get in that person.
But you're one of the only, actually, you're the only practitioner I know that puts this together, all of the pieces, because so often in medicine, everything is kind of broken apart. And unlike a lot of other cancer modalities, yours has a scientific basis. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of science, and it meets alternative and spiritual.
It's art and science, really interwoven together, and it's ancient wisdom and modern knowledge interwoven together. Because what the ancients have taught us in medicine, to me, supersede what science today is telling us. But science still tells us valuable things. But I always say that why is it that whenever we discover something new, out with the old and in with the new, when something that's old, that's been practiced in medicine for years, whether it be what we had talked about off camera, praying with people or singing with them, music with people. This is part of every culture since the beginning of time, part of medicine. And all of a sudden we decide we have modern medicine and we don't need that stuff anymore, when it really should have been, let's keep doing everything that's beautiful about healing. And if we discover something new, let's just add it instead of take away all that stuff. And now we have something new and better, we think. We're so misguided often.
We're totally misguided. And it's funny, most doctors don't realize that a lot of medicine, like Taxol, for example, from the yew tree, that they're just kind of broken down from the medicine that you're using in its totality.
Yeah.
So we are using that. We just don't have a relationship with it. I mean, the fact is, and I might be wrong, but that cancer is I say congestion, but the rates are growing, that they keep people alive longer, but they're not really alive. They're compromised. They're not thriving, as you say. They're surviving.
Yeah.
That's what we do also with death. We try to keep people alive till, they're giving hip operations to people that are, have 2 weeks left to live. So it's how do we balance this out and not overuse medicine or stop when it's time to stop, or stop the chemo, stop the surgeries.
Well, I think there's a few places that were really, fundamental places that we have to shift. One is that we have to shift away from fear and ego and industry into a place that the fundamentals of healing is love. It has to be based in love. And so that major shift has to occur. And Until that happens, I think we're always going to be struggling, because that's where it all comes down to. Like, so in ETMS, you have ancient wisdom mixed with science, modern science, and I spend an hour or two studying every day modern science, and I still try to study ancient wisdom as well, which are the roots of what I do.
Yeah.
And then we have common sense and logic. Many times, many of the things you said, many people don't make decisions based in common sense and logic. It's not logical to have a fast-growing tumor infiltrating your breast and decide to take not only the tumor out, but remove your breast and pull every lymph node out. That's
No.
not logical.
So not logical.
When we know that everything about that provokes growth of cancer. So finally, after 30, 40 years, these butchery surgeries are now not being done as much, but it's taken them that long. And it's not logical when I always tell people that surgery should not be an upfront therapy. I don't say yes and no to everything. There's nothing black and white about anything people should decide. No conventional, all conventional. Those things are not good. You don't think black and white. You assess.
Right.
I call it putting on your Sherlock Holmes hat.
Right.
And investigate. My favorite quote is, it's a capital mistake to theorize before one has data, and sensibly one twist facts to suit theories rather than build theories upon fact-finding. So we have to do our fact-finding. One of the things about ETMS is not to do surgery necessarily up front unless you have to, because if you dial in systemic therapy first, you ultimately treat cancer systemically, which is a systemic disease. Matter of fact, we're learning now it's even deeper than what we know, in that it starts in your stem cells. So what good is it to treat a local tumor if you have a cancer that has an intelligence that will proliferate and progress and invade your body regardless of whether you remove the, what I call the mother tumor. So treat the disease systemically first and up front, because then you're treating yourself from head to toe and more. The second thing is, if your systemic treatment's effective, you will visibly see your tumor reduce.
Right.
That's a good thing. If you remove it all, you don't know if what you're doing systemically is having an impact or not. Third, guess what? My tumor shrunk in half after 2 months. I don't have to do an invasive surgery. I can do a much far less invasive surgery, because my tumor is way reduced in size, which it should do. So those are 3 common sense reasons to do that. And the medicine model is shifting ever so slowly to do what's called neoadjunctive therapy prior to surgery, like in breast cancer. But it's taken forever to get that to happen.
And there's so many confusing messages, like Angelina Jolie, again, jumping because there's a gene test, and
there's
they
no
don't
data
need
to
to be
support
expressed.
doing that. Matter of fact, the data doesn't support doing
know.
double mastectomies prophylactically.
No.
And matter of fact, they find that it delays treatment for women that actually have breast cancer to do that, and then it's associated with, shortened lifespan now to actually go and do that. It's very, and you put such an impact on the vital force or the life force of the body, because, and all of the anabolic nutrients demands go way up under surgery, whether it be zinc, arginine, all of these important factors to your immune system. Natural killer cells go way down. They're essential to how we basically, the surveillance hormones, the surveillance immunological fighters are basically diminished, when we do surgery, which is mostly your natural killer cells. Cytotoxic T cells and natural killer cells are sort of essential to how our immune systems work to keep it healthy.
It's the fear. I mean, I was one of those people, and 11 years ago didn't know I had options, so they rushed me through, the whole kind of car wash, boom, 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 knock it all off, because my mother died of ovarian. And I think that it's so important that people know that they have options. I feel that I'm healthy today because of the protocols I do with you, but, it wasn't necessary. And so again, it's all of that fear.
And there's also like I said, the ego is also tied into control. And so often in medicine, there's a sense of control when nobody really knows anything when it comes to, whether to do chemo or not. And, chemo's not a black and white thing either. You can do chemo and do chemo that is highly sensitive to your cancer, diminish it dramatically, and not cost the host too much toxicity, or you could do chemo that does little. Your tumor can grow in spite of the chemo that you've chosen to do, and your host is taking a tremendous beating. So some people get value and some people don't. So what is the net effect? Ultimately, it's probably a wash across the board. But what
Right.
I've learned to do is figure out, how can I learn what people are going to benefit not only from chemo, but what type of chemo? So I've gotten very much an expert in what I call assessing the tumor, just like assessing the host. And so there are now numerous biomarkers that are predictive of often sensitivity or response. Are they perfect? No. But when you start to put them all together and layer them, superimpose one biomarker on top of the other, often patterns come to unveil what would ultimately be a tumor that might be sensitive. And then the factors that may be causing resistance, guess what? Botanical medicine is excellent at inhibiting many of those factors, whether it be multi-resistant pumps, P-glycoprotein pumps, ways that the tumors pump chemotherapy out, whether it be ways that we inhibit a lot of the other mutational alterations that are happening in the tumor, like BCL2 BAX imbalances, P53, all of the mutations, and all these things make people not get great response from chemo, or they initially get honeymoon response. They do the chemo and wow, my tumor shrunk, and then 2 or 3 treatments later, it's not working anymore because the tumors have adapted. And so all of that is usually greatly supported by doing botanical medicine. So we can again use botanical medicine to potentiate chemotherapy, immunotherapy, targeted therapy, which are all different classes of medicine. We could use botanical medicine to alter the chemistry, protect an organ, the kidneys or the liver or the brain. Or we can use it to strengthen the life force of the person, build their constitution up, give them a better sense of internal energy, whether it be their Shen or their spirit or their vital force or their vital essence, whether it be certain organ systems of the body, their heart, their lungs, their liver, their spleen. So we have so many ways with our botanical toolbox to influence outcome in
huge.
people.